I did my contemporary health project on intermittent fasting, where we look at a popular health trend and decide whether it's effective and safe for people to do. Did mine on intermittent fasting.
Nice.
So what is it and what's its purpose? So it's an eating pattern that can be used to lose weight and improve one's health. And it's basically just two parts: intermittent, which means non-continuous, and fasting, which means you're abstaining from caloric consumption. And the purpose is to create a calorie deficit, which causes your body to have to rely on fat as a mean of energy, as opposed to the calories that you don't have. So fasting's been around for a long time. It's found in a lot of religions like Judaism, Islam, and Buddhism. And it goes back to the time of the hunters and gatherers, when food supply wasn't always consistent, and your body had to adjust to that, not knowing when your next meal was going to come and whatnot. In 1945, intermittent fasting was experimented with lab mice to decide how effective it was, and it became rather popular within the last 5 or 7 years or so, just being commercialized and all that. So some popular regimens. So the Lean Gains Protocol, or the 16-8 method, is 16 hours of fasting and 8 hours of eating. So just to make it simple, if you woke up one morning, you wouldn't eat till noon, and you would stop eating around 8 o'clock. And then you'd fast again until noon the next day for those 16 hours. The alternate day fasting regimen is where you eat normally for 24 hours and fast the next day for 24 hours. So if you stop eating dinner one day, you wouldn't eat again until dinner the following day. And then the 5-2 diet, which is where you eat normally for 5 days out of the week and fast on the other 2. And typically you wouldn't want to do those 2 days back to back, because then you wouldn't eat for 48 hours. So Hankey, Klukowska, and Lean, they did a systematic review in 2015, which was done to find the effectiveness of intermittent fasting. And in their review, they reviewed dozens of different studies where intermittent fasting regimens varied from either 1 day of fasting out of the week up to 4 days total of fasting out of the week. So to compare, they looked at how much weight was lost among all the different articles, you could say. So in all of them, it was consistent that the mean weight loss after 1 month was around 2.6% of your original body weight. And if you continued this through 6 months, you would lose up to 9% after the 6 months of your original body weight. And then when you continue after the 6-month interview, you're just more or less trying to manage your body weight and keep your newfound lifestyle going. So during this time period, up to 2 months after the 6-month period, you would lose about another 8.2% of your original body weight. So it was found that more weight was lost, obviously, the longer you stuck with the regimen. So after 6 months, like I said, people lost up to 9% of their original body weight. So if we took that into a 200-pound male in 6 months of intermittent fasting, they would only lose about 16 pounds, which if you're trying to lose weight, losing 16 pounds over 6 months might not be super impressive. But if we go back to what intermittent fasting is important for, and that's to keep the calorie deficit in check. So when you're in a calorie deficit, you're burning fat as opposed to regular calories, so you could lose your body fat. So what else besides weight loss can intermittent fasting be used for? So heart disease is the #1 killer of all Americans, and it has been for a long time. And heart disease is caused by plenty of things: lack of exercise, poor diet, which causes your arteries to clog, which is atherosclerosis. And this is HDL versus LDL. I don't know if you all are familiar. Do you know what HDL is or LDL is?
Cholesterol.
Okay. Well, there's good and bad cholesterol, and HDL cholesterol is good. That's right. LDL is bad. So these fine people up there conducted another experiment looking at intermittent fasting on human subjects as opposed to mice subjects, and different fasting regimens. Some days you would eat 12 to 1,500 calories. In some it was 5 days of straight 80% calorie consumption as opposed to what you'd normally eat, or just 2 days out of the week only eating a quarter of what you normally would. In all of these, about 60% of the subjects had bad cholesterol levels go down and good cholesterols go up. So when you're decreasing the amount of LDL, that means you're losing the bad plaque in your arteries. When you increase your HDL, you're putting more antibodies into your body to fight off the bad plaque and cholesterol. This next study basically looks at intermittent fasting and whether it has an impact on cognitive functions, which are also known as brain functions. So they used lab mice in this experiment, and they found that mice on an intermittent fasting regimen had better learning abilities, and better memory through trials of completing a maze. These mice also had thicker CA1 pyramidal cells, which are found in the hippocampus, which is used to store long-term memory and things like that, and mordeberin, which is a protein which is integral for neuron production. So the disease process, there's a few different models, but Matson, Largo, and Harvey looked at how intermittent fasting can affect how someone battles with debilitating diseases and whether they can even counter them. And it was found that intermittent fasting does aid in combating and sometimes completely curing people, especially with diabetes and Alzheimer's. It's hypothesized that this intermittent fasting regimen is like one of the steps in curing the Alzheimer's, since there's no cure at the moment. So intermittent fasting in everyday lives. For some people, working out on fasting days can be no problem, but for others it could be the complete opposite. I looked in one article where they interviewed people who do intermittent fasting, and one guy who does CrossFit said he literally just could not work out on days where he had to fast for 24 hours, which I'll talk more about at the end of this slide. But committing to an intermittent fasting regimen takes time to get acclimated. You gotta get your body used to skipping breakfast and not eating until noon, or if you're doing the 5-2 diet, you have to get your body used to having whole days without eating any food. You gotta try out different methods just to find out what works well for you and your lifestyle. And the quality of food is equally important to how much food you're eating. So if you're doing a 1,500 calorie restriction, which instead of having 2,000, if you're eating junk food for the 1,500 calories, you're not going to see as many results as if you're eating healthy and natural foods for the 1,500 calories. So is it safe and is it effective? Intermittent fasting, I guess, is a fairly successful way in losing body weight and body fat. And it's also effective in managing people's cholesterol. But more research is definitely needed to conclude whether intermittent fasting regimens really impact brain function at all. Since most of the research was done using lab mice, it's hard to fully infer what it's going to be like in humans. The safety of intermittent fasting relies heavily on the user. They have to be responsible with their fasting days and just their diet in general. You don't want to fast too long or fast too much and risk having eating disorders, which bring in a bunch of new problems as it is. But if done correctly, then yes, I would say that intermittent fasting is safe for the general public. Let's take a test. So what is the purpose of intermittent fasting?
To decrease your calorie intake per day so that your body burns fat instead of calories.
Right. Is fasting rooted in any particular religion? If so, name which religion.
Muslim religion.
Okay.
Islam.
Islam
There you go.
religion.
So name 2 intermittent fasting regimens.
7-7 method.
No. Here's a hint.
The 16 to 8 method.
Yeah. One more. I talked about 3.
5 by 5.
No.
No.
5 by 2.
There you go.
5, 2.
What happens when a person burns more calories than they take in? You said it in your first answer.
Oh, they lose fat.
Yes. What were 2 types of cholesterol named in the presentation?
HDL and LDL.
Which is good and which is bad?
LDL is good. HDL. Oh no, LDL is bad. Yeah, HDL is good.
And how does intermittent fasting interact with these cholesterols?
Decreases LDL, increases HDL.
And if you had to choose which intermittent fasting regimen would work for you and your lifestyle, which one would you pick?
I don't think I would ever do it.
Fair enough.
16 to 8. It's pretty much my lifestyle right now.
Gotcha. Well, alright, thank you.